In the heart of the ancient Roman Empire, under the blistering sun of the Colosseum, the clash of swords, the roar of crowds, and the thundering sound of hooves set the stage for a battle that would forever echo through history. The arena, vast and grand, was the birthplace of legendary combat, where the might of man met the raw power of beasts. But none of these battles were as terrifying, as awe-inspiring, or as shocking as the one that was about to unfold. A war elephant, colossal and fierce, stood poised to face the finest gladiators the Empire had to offer. The gladiators had trained for years, honing their skills in the unforgiving conditions of the arena. They were men of strength and courage born for combat, their bodies scarred from countless battles. But today, they were about to face an enemy unlike any other. The elephant brought from the distant lands of India was no ordinary beast. Standing at over 10 feet tall, with tusks as long as spears and a massive body armored in thick skin, it was a living fortress of destruction. The crowd was in a frenzy, the air thick with anticipation. Today there would be bloodshed, but the question was, whose blood would be spilled? The battle began with the elephant charging into the arena, its massive feet pounding against the earth, shaking the very ground beneath the gladiators' feet. Its trumpet-like roar echoed off the stone walls, sending a shiver down the spines of even the bravest warriors. The gladiators, armed with their shields and spears, stood their ground, but they knew that this battle would not be won with brute force alone. As the elephant advanced, its eyes locked onto the nearest gladiator, a seasoned fighter named Marcus. His grip tightened around his spear, the weapon now feeling insignificant in the face of such a beast. He had fought men, tigers, and even lions, but never had he felt such dread. The elephant's sheer size was overwhelming, its massive form blocking out the sun as it charged forward. The first gladiator lunged, attempting to strike the elephant's side, but the beast was too swift, sidestepping with surprising agility. Its massive trunk shot out, knocking the gladiator aside as if he were a mere child. The crowd roared with excitement, but for Marcus and his comrades, this was no longer a battle. It was a desperate struggle for survival. The elephant's tusks were its deadliest weapon. One swing of those tusks could cleave a man in two, and it wasn't long before the gladiators realized that they had to focus their attacks on the elephant's vulnerable spots, its eyes, its legs, the joints beneath its thick armor. But the elephant, with its primal instincts and incredible strength, was no easy target. The next gladiator, a young man named Gaius, attempted to distract the elephant by darting from one side to the other, hoping to find an opening. He threw his spear, aiming for the elephant's eye, but the beast turned just in time, and the spear glanced harmlessly off its tough hide. In retaliation, the elephant charged at Gaius, its tusks aimed directly at him. The young gladiator barely managed to leap out of the way, landing with a hard thud on the ground, his body bruised and battered. The gladiators knew they couldn't win through conventional means. They needed a plan, and quickly. They began to move in unison, using their shields to deflect the elephant's blows and trying to land precise strikes with their spears. But it was becoming clear that no matter how skilled they were, the elephant was far too powerful. It had the strength of a dozen men, and its massive bulk seemed unstoppable. In the midst of the chaos, a voice rang out, an experienced gladiator named Decimus who had fought in countless arena battles. He called for the gladiators to regroup to fight as one. "We fight together or we fall one by one," he shouted, his voice carrying over the noise of the battle. The gladiators circled the elephant, trying to keep it distracted while they waited for an opening. They couldn't afford to make a single mistake. But even as they worked together, the elephant proved to be a relentless force, pushing them back with its sheer power. For every strike they landed, the elephant seemed to absorb it without flinching, its tough skin and thick muscles shrugging off their attacks. The battle was turning in its favor, and the gladiators could feel it. They were running out of time. Some began to fear that they might not make it out of the arena alive. As the battle raged on, the elephant's sheer force started to take its toll. The gladiators, though skilled, were no match for the beast's size and strength. But then, in a flash of brilliance, Marcus saw something. The elephant's side was exposed, its armor of skin and muscle thinner in this area. With a mighty shout, he lunged forward, aiming his spear at the vulnerable spot. The tip of the spear pierced the skin, and the elephant let out a deafening roar of pain. It was a direct hit. The beast staggered back, momentarily stunned, and that's when the other gladiators seized their opportunity. They attacked with everything they had left, aiming for the same spot. The elephant's movements grew slower, its once unstoppable charge now faltering. It was clear that the beast was weakening, but victory was not certain yet. The elephant was a creature of rage and strength, and it would not go down without a fight. With one final, desperate charge, it swept through the gladiators, knocking them aside like mere children. But the damage had been done. The elephant's wounds were too great, and with one last bellow it fell to the ground, its massive body crashing with a thunderous sound. The Colosseum fell silent for a moment, the crowd unsure of what had just transpired. It had been a battle unlike any other. The gladiators stood victorious, but it was a victory earned through sacrifice, strategy, and the courage to face the impossible. In the end, the battle between the Roman gladiators and the colossal war elephant would go down in history as one of the most thrilling and shocking contests the ancient world had ever seen. The empire's warriors had faced a beast of unimaginable strength and emerged victorious, not because they were stronger, but because they fought with every ounce of their skill and courage. And in that, they had proven that no matter the odds, there was always a way to triumph. In the heart of the ancient Roman Empire, under the blistering sun of the Colosseum, the clash of swords, the roar of crowds, and the thundering sound of hooves set the stage for a battle that would forever echo through history. The arena, vast and grand, was the birthplace of legendary combat, where the might of man met the raw power of beasts. But none of these battles were as terrifying, as awe-inspiring, or as shocking as the one that was about to unfold. A war elephant, colossal and fierce, stood poised to face the finest gladiators the empire had to offer. This particular day in Rome was one of high anticipation. Word had spread across the empire that an exotic animal, a creature of legend, had been brought to the capital for a demonstration of power. This was no ordinary battle. The war elephant, an enormous beast hailing from the distant lands of India, was known for its terrifying strength, remarkable intelligence, and size that dwarfed even the fiercest of combatants. Roman citizens had only heard rumors of such creatures, and they had come in droves to witness the spectacle. The gladiators had trained for years, honing their skills in the unforgiving conditions of the arena. They were men of strength and courage born for combat, their bodies scarred from countless battles. But today, they were about to face an enemy unlike any other. The elephant, standing over 10 feet tall, had tusks as long as spears, and a massive body armored in thick skin. It was a living fortress of destruction, and the gladiators knew that this would be no ordinary fight. The crowd was in a frenzy, their excitement palpable, the air thick with anticipation. The dust kicked up by the beast's approach added a layer of tension to the scene. Today, there would be bloodshed, but the question was, whose blood would be spilled? The Roman arena, as grand as it was, had never witnessed a spectacle quite like this. For years, the blood of man had spilled onto the sand, with gladiators fighting against each other, against animals, and sometimes even against the gods themselves in the form of mythological beasts. But now, there was an unnatural silence as the elephant made its entrance. Its presence was so overwhelming that it felt as though the entire world had stopped to watch. It was not just the size of the creature, but the sense of awe it inspired in every Roman who witnessed its arrival. Even the emperor, sitting high above the arena in his ornate box, seemed mesmerized by the sight. The elephant's first roar shattered the silence. It was a sound so deep, so primal that it sent ripples through the crowd. The gladiators, already on edge, could feel their hearts race. Their instincts told them to be cautious, but pride and honor drove them forward. They had fought the fiercest creatures the empire could offer, and this beast would be no different. At least that's what they told themselves. As the elephant advanced, its massive feet pounded against the earth, shaking the very ground beneath the gladiators' feet. The dust rose in thick clouds, making it harder to see. The gladiators' weapons, swords, spears, and shields, seemed almost insignificant when compared to the beast's massive form. It was a creature built for destruction, each step it took sending ripples through the sands of the arena. The first gladiator to face the elephant was Marcus, a seasoned veteran known for his sharp mind and impeccable skill in battle. He had been in countless life-or-death duels, but never had he faced anything like this. His eyes narrowed as he sized up the creature, studying its every move. The elephant's tusks were long and menacing, and its thick hide seemed impenetrable. Marcus gripped his spear tighter, his knuckles white with tension. It would take everything he had to survive this fight, and he knew that one misstep could be fatal. Marcus took a deep breath, his mind racing through every technique he had learned over the years. He knew he had to strike the beast's eyes, the one vulnerable spot that could potentially bring it down. But the elephant was no fool. It had faced warriors before, and it had learned to adapt. Its trunk swung in every direction, knocking down anything in its path. It was clear that brute strength alone wouldn't win this battle. As Marcus lunged forward, his spear aimed for the elephant's left eye, the beast twisted its body with terrifying speed. The spear missed, only grazing the side of its head. The elephant let out a furious trumpet and charged. The sheer force of its movement sent Marcus tumbling to the ground. His shield clattered out of reach as he scrambled to regain his footing. The crowd gasped as the mighty beast bore down on him, its tusks now aiming for him with deadly precision. At the last moment, Marcus rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the tusks that would have impaled him. The air was thick with the sound of battle, and Marcus could feel his heart pounding in his chest. This was no longer just a fight for survival, it was a fight to outsmart the beast. Meanwhile, the other gladiators began to rally, determined not to let Marcus face this creature alone. Gaius, a younger fighter with a reputation for quickness, darted to the opposite side of the elephant, trying to distract it. He threw his spear, aiming for the elephant's exposed flank, but the beast twisted just in time, sending the spear clattering to the ground. Undeterred, Gaius drew his sword and began to circle the elephant, looking for an opening. The crowd watched, captivated by the intensity of the fight. The next gladiator to make his move was Decimus, a warrior known for his strength and experience. He was older than the others, but his years of battle had honed his senses to an incredible degree. He knew that they could not win through sheer force. It wasn't just the elephant's size they had to contend with, it was its intelligence. The beast was not mindlessly charging. It was calculating its moves, learning from the gladiators' every action. Decimus shouted to the others, calling for them to regroup. "We must fight together," Decimus cried, his voice carrying across the arena. "If we attack one by one, we will fall." The gladiators quickly circled the elephant, working as a unit to confuse and distract it. But the elephant, sensing their plan, began to shift its focus. Its massive tusks swept through the air, knocking down shields and sending men sprawling. The gladiators, though skilled, found themselves overwhelmed by the creature's size and power. Every time they tried to strike, the elephant reacted with lethal precision. And then, as if by some stroke of fate, Marcus saw his chance. The elephant, momentarily distracted by Decimus' movements, had exposed its side, its thick skin just barely thinner here than anywhere else. With a roar of determination, Marcus lunged forward, his spear aimed directly for the opening. He struck hard, feeling the weapon pierce the elephant's flesh. The beast howled in pain, its body shuddering as it staggered back. The gladiators took their cue and surged forward, their strikes landing in unison. The elephant, once unstoppable, began to slow. Its massive body shuddered, and with one final guttural cry, it fell to the sands of the arena, defeated. The Colosseum erupted into thunderous applause. The crowd standing to their feet in a mixture of awe and disbelief. For the gladiators, though, the victory was bittersweet. The battle had taken a toll on them all. Their bodies were bruised, bloodied, and battered, but they had survived. They had faced the impossible and had emerged victorious. It was a moment of glory that would forever be etched into the history of Rome. As the dust settled in the arena, the gladiators stood over the fallen elephant, their chests heaving with exhaustion. The once dominant beast lay motionless, its massive body sprawled across the sands. It was a testament to the power of the gladiators' resolve and teamwork, but also to their ability to adapt and outsmart a creature far stronger than any man. The emperor, watching from his high box, could not hide his astonishment. He had witnessed countless battles in the Colosseum, but nothing had ever come close to the spectacle he had just seen. He signaled to the herald, who immediately called for silence. The crowd, still roaring with excitement, slowly began to quiet down. A single figure stepped forward from the ranks of the gladiators, Decimus, the oldest and most seasoned of them all. His armor was dented, his sword bloodied, but his stance was firm and proud. He raised his arm in salute to the emperor, acknowledging the victory they had achieved. The emperor, his voice carrying over the arena, spoke with a mixture of respect and admiration. "Today you have shown the true meaning of courage," he said. "You have faced the might of a creature that no man could have defeated alone. You are the finest warriors Rome has ever known." The gladiators lowered their heads in acknowledgement, but their thoughts were not on the emperor's praise. They were thinking of the battle, the struggle that had tested them in ways they had never imagined. Each of them had faced moments of fear, moments of doubt, but in the end they had stood strong. They had fought as one, but their victory, as glorious as it was, came with a heavy price. Many of the gladiators had suffered injuries during the battle, and several were too wounded to continue fighting. The elephant, despite its terrifying power, had been brought down not by the strength of a single gladiator, but by their collective effort, by their intelligence, and by their unwavering courage. As the gladiators made their way out of the arena, the crowd continued to cheer. They had just witnessed history. It was a victory that would be talked about for generations to come, a tale that would inspire poets, playwrights, and historians. But for the gladiators, it was just another day in the arena, a day where they had faced death and emerged victorious. In the days that followed, the story of the battle between the Roman gladiators and the colossal war elephant spread throughout the empire. It was retold in every corner of Rome, from the grand forums to the humble homes of the common people. The tale of how a group of men had faced an unimaginable foe and triumphed became the stuff of legend. The names of the gladiators, Marcus, Gaius, Decimus, were whispered in awe. They had become symbols of Roman strength and resilience, the embodiment of the empire's spirit. But even as the glory of the battle was celebrated, the gladiators knew that the real price of victory was far greater than any honor or praise they received. The arena was a place of both glory and suffering, where the line between life and death was razor-thin. The victories they earned were hard-fought, but the scars they carried were reminders of the brutal reality of their existence. For the elephant, too, the battle had been a testament to its power and strength. It had fought with all its might, but in the end, it had succumbed to the skill and strategy of the gladiators. The elephant's death marked the end of an era, a time when beasts were pitted against men in the name of spectacle. The arena, once a place where animals and humans fought for dominance, had seen its last great clash between man and beast. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the gladiators continued to fight in the Colosseum, but the memory of the war elephant remained with them. It was a reminder of what they had faced and of what they had overcome. They knew that each battle they fought could be their last, but they also knew that they were part of something much larger than themselves. They were part of the Roman legacy, an empire built on strength, honor, and the will to survive. The story of the Roman gladiators and the colossal war elephant would forever live on, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, courage, teamwork, and determination could lead to victory. It would be remembered as one of the greatest battles ever fought in the history of the Roman Empire. A battle that shocked the ancient world and left an indelible mark on the hearts of those who witnessed it. As the months passed, the story of the colossal war elephant spread across the empire like wildfire. It became a symbol, a tale of triumph and courage, woven into the very fabric of Roman culture. The gladiators, once anonymous faces in the arena, were now household names, celebrated as heroes. They had faced the unimaginable and had emerged victorious, not through brute force, but through their skill, their teamwork, and their unwavering determination. But behind the glory and praise, the gladiators knew the truth of their existence. They were warriors bound by duty, trapped in a cycle of endless combat. Every victory, every cheer came at the cost of their freedom. They were not just fighters, they were slaves, owned by the arena, their lives controlled by the whims of their masters. The Colosseum, with all its grandeur and spectacle, was their prison. And the battle with the war elephant, despite its monumental significance, was just another chapter in their endless struggle for survival. For Marcus, the victory had been a turning point. It was not just the battle with the elephant that haunted him, but the realization that he would never be free. He had seen men rise to fame in the arena, only to fall in the blink of an eye. The glory was fleeting, and the price of it was high. He had earned his place in Roman history, but at what cost? Gaius, the young gladiator who had fought alongside Marcus, was also deeply affected by the battle. He had always dreamed of becoming a hero, but now he understood that heroes were made in the arena not by their victories, but by the sacrifices they were forced to make. The young fighter had seen comrades fall, and he knew that one day he too would face the same fate. But for now, he fought on, driven by the memory of that epic battle and the promise of glory that came with it. Decimus, the eldest gladiator, had seen it all. He had fought in countless battles, and though his body was worn and scarred, his spirit remained unbroken. He knew the truth that the younger gladiators had yet to learn, that the arena was not just a place of glory, but of death. Each fight brought them closer to the end, and he had made peace with that. But he had also made peace with the fact that he was part of something greater than himself, a part of the legacy of Rome, the empire that had shaped the world. But for all their sacrifices, for all their victories, the gladiators knew that their names would be forgotten in time. The Colosseum would continue to stand, its stones soaked with the blood of countless fighters. New warriors would rise, new battles would be fought, and the empire would march on. The war elephant, despite its formidable strength, was now just another chapter in the history of Rome, a story that would eventually fade into legend. And yet, as the gladiators left the arena for the final time, their bodies battered and bruised, their hearts heavy with the weight of their existence, they understood something. They had given everything for the empire, for the glory of Rome. And while their names might fade, their story would live on. They had faced the impossible, and they had triumphed. They had shown the world that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there was always a way to survive, always a way to fight for victory. And so, the legend of the gladiators and the war elephant endured, told and retold through the ages. It became a symbol of courage, a reminder of the indomitable will of the human spirit. It was a battle that had shocked the ancient world, a contest between man and beast that had left an indelible mark on history. And it was a story that would continue to inspire generations of warriors, reminding them that no matter the size of the enemy, no matter the challenges they faced, victory was always within their reach. Months turned to years, and the tale of the battle between the gladiators and the colossal war elephant became a part of the Roman legend. Retold by bards and scribes, immortalized in stories that spanned across the empire. The story wasn't just about a brutal fight, it was about what it meant to stand against the impossible. The gladiators had not only survived the clash, but had become symbols of resilience and determination, qualities the empire held in high regard. Yet the Colosseum, despite the glory it bestowed upon its victors, remained a place of suffering for those who fought within it. While the names of Marcus, Gaius, and Decimus were celebrated, their lives were far from the grandeur the empire painted them to be. The cold reality of their existence lingered in the shadows of their fame. They were gladiators, slaves by birth, by circumstance, and by the unforgiving nature of the arena. For Marcus, the victory over the war elephant became a double-edged sword. He was hailed as a hero, his name forever etched into the annals of Roman history. Statues were built in his likeness, and the crowds cheered his name whenever he entered the arena. But despite all of this, Marcus couldn't escape the feeling of emptiness that grew within him. He had fought for his life and for the empire's pride, but in return, he had received nothing but the hollow honor of a fleeting victory. Every day spent in the arena was a day closer to the end. He had never truly felt free. His thoughts were often consumed with the idea of what lay beyond the gates of the Colosseum. Would he ever know what it was like to live a life outside of bloodshed? Would he ever walk the streets of Rome as a free man? These questions haunted him every time he looked into the eyes of his fellow gladiators, men who had all given up their freedom for a chance at glory that would never be theirs. The empire may have celebrated them, but in the end, they were still bound by chains, shackled by the expectations of the arena. Gaius, on the other hand, saw the battle with the war elephant differently. To him, it was the pinnacle of his career as a gladiator. His youth and ambition had driven him to pursue a reputation as a warrior of unmatched skill, but it was the fight with the elephant that had shaped him most. It was the day he became a legend, the day he proved to himself and to the world that he had what it took to survive, no matter the odds. He had watched his fellow gladiators fall one by one as they faced the beast. But Gaius had fought with everything he had, and it was that determination that had earned him his place in Roman history. But as the years went on, Gaius too began to feel the burden of his fame. He had become a star, a symbol of what a gladiator could achieve in the arena, but the weight of his success pressed down on him every time he stepped onto the blood-stained sands. The cheers of the crowd were no longer enough to drown out the whispers in his mind, the realization that his future was limited to the arena. He was trapped in a cycle that seemed impossible to break. He had dreamed of glory, but now he wondered whether it was worth the price. Decimus, the eldest of the gladiators, had long ago accepted his fate. He had lived a life of combat, his body scarred and weary from years of service to the empire. The battle with the war elephant had been just another in a long line of challenges he had faced. But unlike the younger gladiators, Decimus had seen the truth. The arena was not a place of honor, but a place where men were ground down by the wheels of an empire that saw them as nothing more than tools for entertainment. The young warriors, full of ambition and dreams of glory, had yet to realize that in the end, the arena would take everything from them. Decimus had lost many comrades over the years, and he had made peace with the fact that his own time would come. He no longer sought glory or recognition. He fought because it was all he knew. The war elephant, though a formidable opponent, had been just another battle in a life defined by combat. But even Decimus could not help but marvel at the sheer scale of the beast, the strength it exhibited in the fight, and the way it mirrored the very struggle of the gladiators themselves. The elephant had been a symbol of power and destruction, much like the Roman Empire, but in the end, it too had fallen. But even in their acceptance of their fate, the gladiators could not ignore the fact that they had become legends. Their names would be remembered for centuries, their story retold by generations of Romans who looked to their courage as a symbol of strength. The battle with the elephant had become a myth, a tale that transcended time. It had been a fight between man and beast, but it had also been a fight between freedom and enslavement, between survival and death. As the gladiators continued to fight in the Colosseum, their victories and defeats began to blur into one long, unbroken chain of battles. The war elephant, despite its immense power, had been a fleeting moment in their lives, but it had left a mark, both on them and on the empire. The Colosseum continued to host battles, and the empire continued to expand, but for the gladiators, each fight was just another step closer to their inevitable end. The Roman people, however, had no such concerns. To them, the arena was a place of spectacle, a place to forget the struggles of everyday life. The gladiators, with their bloodied swords and scars, were no longer just men. They were heroes, mythologized figures who embodied the very spirit of Rome. And as the empire grew, so too did the legend of the gladiators and the war elephant. The Colosseum, with its towering walls and sun-drenched sands, became a symbol of the empire's power and might, a place where man and beast were tested in a battle for survival. But as the story of the gladiators and the war elephant continued to be told, the truth of their lives remained hidden beneath the surface. They were not just fighters. They were men who had been broken and rebuilt, men who had been forced to fight for their survival in a world that cared little for their humanity. And in that, they were the true symbols of the empire. They were not just warriors, they were the price of Rome's glory. As the years passed, the story of the gladiators and the battle with the war elephant became more than just a legend. It became a defining moment in the history of the Roman Empire. The empire itself was built on the backs of men like Marcus, Gaius, and Decimus, men who had been forced to fight for survival, their lives dictated by the whims of the emperor and the crowds. But what many did not understand was the deeper cost of such glory. What did it mean to be celebrated as a hero, when in reality you were nothing more than a pawn in the game of an empire that would soon discard you? For Marcus, the battle with the elephant had solidified his place in Roman history. But as the years wore on, the weight of his fame began to wear him down. His once youthful spirit, filled with the fire of ambition and the thirst for glory, had begun to fade. The cheers of the crowd no longer had the same effect on him. The hollow feeling that had grown inside him after the battle now seemed inescapable. Every victory, every cheer, felt like a reminder of his captivity. The Colosseum, with all its grandeur and spectacle, had become his prison. Marcus had once dreamed of freedom, of walking the streets of Rome as a man unshackled by the chains of servitude. But as the days passed, he realized that such dreams were nothing more than illusions. The empire was not built on freedom, it was built on the backs of men like him. It was built on the blood of those who fought in the arena, who gave their lives to entertain the masses. He had earned his place in Roman history, but at what cost? The battle with the war elephant had been a victory, but it had come with a heavy price. He had won the admiration of the people, but he had lost something far more valuable, his sense of self. Gaius, still young and filled with the vigor of youth, had once believed that glory in the arena would grant him everything he had ever wanted. The cheers of the crowd, the adulation of the masses, were all he needed. The battle with the war elephant had been his moment of triumph, the defining moment of his career. But as time went on, Gaius too began to see the cost of his fame. He had been hailed as a hero, but what did that really mean? Heroes were immortalized in stories, but they were also forgotten just as quickly. The very nature of their glory was fleeting. He had fought and won, but now, as he looked around at the other gladiators, he could see the same weariness in their eyes, the same realization that their lives were defined by the arena. And that one day, they too would be forgotten. For Decimus, the battle with the elephant had been just another day in the arena, a day that blurred into the countless others that had come before it. He had seen many warriors come and go, and he knew that the life of a gladiator was not a life at all. It was a slow, painful march towards death, a march that could only be ended by the will of the emperor or the crowd. But even Decimus, in all his years of experience, could not ignore